Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. In today's video, we're going to have a look at how we can generate a Logic App unit test from the run history of an existing run of a Logic App. So I'm over here in my VS Code instance, and I guess I'm gonna just zoom in slightly for a minute. Okay, so here we are. I'm up in my Logic App project up here, and I'm going to have a look at my Hello World workflow. We've obviously got the workflow.json over here, and I've basically opened up this workflow in two ways. So here's the designer, and here's the kind of the runtime for it. And you can see this workflow here is really simple. We take a basic request. The request doesn't need to have any kind of message in it. We're going to execute an inline function. So this is really the kind of almost the helper logic app you'll get started with when you set a project. So we're going to execute the inline function. We're then going to get a response we return to the caller. So I'm going to start by going over to my my overview, and I'm going to grab the URL, and I'm going to go over to Postman. So I've already F5'd and I've got my Logic app running. I've pasted my URL into Postman, so you can see we're running this against the local host here. I'm then going to click send, and we'll go and execute that workflow. And you can see we get a little message back here saying what the weather is and the target zip code that we've put into the function. So that's really nice and simple, and you can see here's my run. And I'm going to open up that run now, and we'll have a look at what happens. So we had our basic request came in. There was no body on the request or anything. We executed the function here. So we can see the output from the function. You can see the parameters we passed in, and we returned a response here. So that's all really easy stuff. We've all seen that many times before. Now, the bit that we're going to use here is we're going to use this create unit test from run. So we're using this instance of the Logic app here. And if I click this, then we'll see a little message will pop up at the top here. So we'll call this test Mike Hello World. And we'll see if we zoom back in a little bit again, you'll see over on my left hand side here, so I already have my Logic app folder. So this is where the tests, if you create a test for the very first time, it'll create this project for you. And what it'll do is it'll basically create a folder for each workflow. So the tests it generates for the workflow that we're testing here, the one called Hello World, it'll put inside a Hello World folder. And you'll see there's a number of folders already in here. So I guess we can probably ignore that one because that's a test I've already created. And what it's created this time is Mike Hello World. It'll also update the outputs, these mock outputs here, and there'll be some test settings over here as well. So that's what's going to get generated by the creation. So if we have a look at what's in here, so basically the mock outputs are really classes that it generates from the actions within the workflow. So this code all gets generated for you. We've got the action mock here, and then you can see we've got some constructors, and this is really setting up the framework usage for the actions you're going to use when you write your test. So we've got one for the caller local functions. This was the action where I call the function app. And then we've got the action representing the HTTP request trigger. So you can see this inherits from trigger mock, whereas the other one at the top here, this one inherits from action mock. So there's a slight difference because of the different kinds of actions they are. Now, if we go into Hello World Mike, we'll see we've got two files over here. So we've got the mock JSON file, which will have data representing the data that I had in that workflow run, and then we've got my actual test in that C# class here. So if we have a quick look at the JSON file, you'll see This represents the data that we pushed in, so there was no message body we sent in. We had some headers. You can see it's even picked up the Postman header because we originally triggered it from Postman. And then we've got the action mock here, which contains the body that the function returns. So what will happen is when we call this the logic app runtime, instead of calling the function, it's really going to return this dummy response JSON here, and it's going to return that back to the function. Okay, so let's have a look at how we use this within the testing. So the test that got generated for us, you can see we've got all the typical MS test decorators here. So we've got a test class, test initialization. And if we go further down, you'll see we've got our operation. So actually the test framework is going to create a couple of different test methods for us. So we probably want to pick and choose which one we like the look of best. So as a good example here, the first one, if we have a look at what this is doing, so it creates the mock data definition, it creates an action mock, and it's providing the name, and then we can specify some properties here. The test mock definition will actually load up the kind of the file. If we want to, if we use that JSON file, it'll load that up for us. It's then going to create the test run here, and then it's going to do some assertions at the end. So it'll assert that the test run was as expected. The other version of this test method, if you notice here, one of the differences, it actually lets you override a bunch of information about that mock action. So you can see here we're kind of modifying things like the outputs. This will get really useful for error conditions that we look at in a future video, if you want to dynamically change the responses that go back and things like that. And then I think it also, if I remember right, there's a third scenario here. So this looks like it's a failure scenario. And if we just scroll to the right a bit, so you'll notice here it's indicating that the error, the mock on this one will actually fail. So it'll give us an error scenario, and we'll see how we'll handle that. So here, if we look at the assertion, it's really, it's just asserting that the workflow fails. So what we'll do next is we'll go and have a look at how we run these tests. So if we go over to the testing option over here, and if we build this, we should see some new tests show up under Hello World. We'll just run these tests now. Okay, so you can see they were successful. Now, the thing to note here is with these tests, we've created the runtime, we've loaded up the workflow, we've executed it, we've mocked some actions, but the key bit that we've only really done a limited number of assertions here. So we checked that we had a non-null test run, and we checked the workflow status so that we know the workflow either succeeded or failed, but we don't actually know what we did inside the workflow. Thank you for listening to today's video. We hope that shows how to get up and running with a basic test. We'll be looking at other things like how to add more assertions in future videos, and we'll be looking at how to generate from the designer, and we'll look at some more advanced scenarios. But that was really a get up and running version of the Hello World test.